On April 3rd, 2004, Rosie O'Donnell's reign as the Kids' Choice Awards host came to an end. The hosts would begin rotating yearly once more, starting with Mike Myers and Cameron Diaz, co-stars of the upcoming sequel to Shrek. The KCAs promised to be bigger and better than ever before, and I was so grounded!
Mike Myers and Cameron Diaz host Nickelodeon's Kids' Choice Awards live Saturday, April 3rd at 8, 7 Central on Nick. I think you got the job.
At least for that Saturday night. Fortunately, since bedtimes mean nothing during spring break, I was able to catch the rerun the next night in all its slimy glory. And of course, following the rerun of the KCAs was a rerun of Nickelodeon's newest Nicktoon that was going, Ghost.
Nickelodeon's newest Nicktoon is going, Ghost.
As a 10-year-old, I had hyper-focused on plenty of media in my young life. Blue's Clues, Captain Underpants, Pokemon, Digimon, Sonic the Hedgehog, SpongeBob. But there was just something so absolutely mind-bogglingly cool about Danny Phantom that I proceeded to make it my entire personality for the next few years. I was a fanatic, frame one. This show absolutely changed my life. So, to pay tribute to it on its 20th anniversary, let's take a trip down memory lane as I talk at you for a long time as a sassy cartoon avatar PNG. This is a look at Danny Phantom 20 years later.
He's a phantom.
Danny Phantom was first conjured up as a response to Nickelodeon's call for boys action programming, probably to compete with the likes of Kids WB, Fox Kids, and Toonami. Nearly all of the Nickelodeon shows by this point had been slice-of-life comedies, and I think Danny Phantom very much takes a page out of that book as well, being more action comedy than purely action. It also stands out as a much more sequential series than other Nickelodeon series, and while it's not essential to watch it in order per se, there are definitely some overarching plots in each episode. So, let's go ahead and rank all 53 of them, starting with Mystery Meat. This episode did a great job introducing Danny and his family, but not so much his friends. Also, it took me several years to understand the line, "Guys, time to make up. Now!" where Tucker and Sam hugged to cover Danny's transformation. I may be stupid. B. Parental Bonding. Technically the third episode of production, but the second to air, and I think it makes the most sense that way because we're introduced to more of the high school cast, who are all just shallow stereotypes at this point. B. One of a Kind. We get introduced to recurring villain Skulker, the first legitimate threat in the series thus far, as well as opening the floodgates for more Ghost Zone lore. Tucker also shines in this episode. A. Attack of the Killer Garage Sale. This episode taught me the Pythagorean Theorem. C. Splitting Images. Hey everybody, egg cream's on me! While Villain of the Week Sidney Poindexter is kind of a hypocrite loser, it's got fun otherworldly elements not really seen with later villains. B. What You Want. Ponies, ponies, ponies. Great Tucker episode. Leaves Sam out so the boys can problem solve, and I think they're better for it. A. Prisoners of Love. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, for now. Skulker once again with a great appearance alongside a menagerie of other villains. Plus, our very first look into the Ghost Zone proper. Super cool. A. My Brother's Keeper. Great character development from Danny and Jazz, and great villains in Spectra and Bertrand. Amazing. S. Now, quick aside, but up to this point was the original order for Season 1. 9 episodes, then 13, then 20. At the time, a lot of the fandom referred to the first 9 episodes as the Magnificent 9, because they felt that they were the strongest, with the exception of Splitting Images for the most part. For some reason, I'm not really sure why, but there was a noticeable difference with animation quality and I guess the direction of the show by episode 10. I'm not really sure what exactly changed because as far as I know, the animation studio didn't change, but there might have been budget or time constraints built into that. Regardless, it's a little more inconsistent going forward. Shades of Grey. Danny's ghost fighting impacts a shallow background character who becomes one of the greatest characters in the show. We also see the first glimpse into Vlad pulling strings behind the scenes. Sam displays having zero chill or subtlety. B. Fanning the flames. Ember was so cool! Hands down one of the best designs in the show. As for the episode, very, very Danny and Sam heavy, but it's fine, I guess. Danny was brainwashed, you know? It's just fine. B tier. Teacher of the Year. A banger Technus episode. Great development between Danny and Lancer, and really cool Tron-inspired environments. B. 13. The 13th episode that actually aired 14th overall. So I really hope Johnny's a teenager, otherwise that makes this episode really, really, really weird, guys. Really, really weird. B. Fright Night. Danny's kind of a jerk in this. Very cool villain and lore, but it's mostly ignored by the plot. C. Public Enemies. Big change to the status quo. Very cool return of Walker alongside of his goons. Wolf is super sick, and Danny's now public ghost enemy number 1. A. Lucky in Love. And once again, really hoping that Kitty and Johnny are like 17 years old, otherwise this makes it really, really, really weird. But I love the idea of Paulina fawning over Phandom. That's cute. B. Maternal Instincts. Danny and Maddie bonding while Vlad's being creepy as hell. C. Life Lessons. How Valerie doesn't realize Fenton is Phandom is truly a mystery to me. B. $1 Million Ghost. Stupid episode. D. Control Freaks. This episode is so good. Gorgeous art direction, threatening and wacky villain, evil Danny slaps, and we get a glimpse into why Sam is the way that she is. S. Memory Blank. Mediocre episode that introduced the, at the time, very controversial logo. Interesting concept, but pretty lame execution. D. Also, Danny shoots a laser out of his butt. It's so... Doctor's Disorders. Not nearly as strong as Spectre's first episode. The hospital setting is very unsettling. C. Pirate Radio. My personal favorite episode. Youngblood is my fave. My personal second favorite episode. Youngblood is my favorite villain and one of my favorite characters in the series overall. He's such a little brat. Pirate Ember is sick, and Danny Fenton leading the charge of teenagers is also very fun. Good for him, good for him. A. Rainstorm. The first of the 4 hour-long specials that we get in the series, and probably both kind of the most confusing in its plot setup, but also really, really cool. It has so many stakes to it. It brings enemies and villains and the community all together, and it proves Danny to be a hero among the town. A. Identity Crisis. Absolutely stupid episode, but I like Super Danny and his dumb sheet cake. Sheet cape. C. The Fenton Menace. My personal favorite episode. Youngblood is great and very much an evil take on a Peter Pan-esque character. This is also Jazz's final opportunity to support her brother without being open about knowing his secret. S. The Ultimate Enemy. What can I say about this episode? This episode was complete fire. You had the time travel aspects, you had Danny's whole freaking family dying, the stakes were super high, the plot was a little convoluted because of time travel shenanigans, but you know, that's okay. But they never really did anything with it but they never really reapproached any of this until almost 20 years after the series ended. Why? Why didn't they bring Dan back? What? Anyway, S tier. The Fright Before Christmas. I love this episode. It makes me feel joy, and I truly do empathize with the ghost boy. The villain is lovely. He's one of my faves. The rhyming is clever. I wish it would stay. S. Secret Weapons. Poor Jazz was done kinda dirty in this episode. Especially considering how strong my brother's keeper, the Fenton Menace, and the Ultimate Enemy were for the siblings. C. Flirting with Disaster. Fantastic episode. Fenton and Valerie have great chemistry together, despite their alter egos hating each other. Technus' best appearance in the series thus far. S. Micromanagement. Danny t-shirt, Danny t-shirt, Danny t-shirt, Danny t-shirt. Also fun chemistry between Phandom and Dash. I really love when the bullies in this series interact like real people. A. Beauty Mart. While I find Sam's endlog behavior annoying, which is kind of a constant throughout the show but is on full display here, I do love that they bring some more personality to Dora. A. King Tuck. Feels too much like a repeat of What You Want, and is disappointing because I feel like you can play on Tucker's jealousy without turning him into a big bad every time. C. Masters of All Time. I am glad that they brought the time travel aspects back so soon after The Ultimate Enemy. It's kind of silly to see Jack Plasmius though, and I think something better could have been done there instead of just making him into Vlad. That's kind of ridiculous, but still, this episode is cool for what it is. A. Reality Trip. Both enjoy and find the special annoying. I like seeing the mostly positive response to Danny's identity, but I hate that it gets retconned in the end. I like that the guys in white and Freak Show feel like legit threats, but the action and climax is lacking. It's super mixed, but I'll give it a B. Double Cross My Heart. I was in Disneyland when this episode premiered. Good thing, because this episode is boring. D. Kindred Spirits. I love this episode so much. I love how crazy and desperate for love Vlad is. I love Danielle. I love how freaking cute she is. I love her design. It's just so good. Ah! S. Now before we get into season 3, for the most part up to this point, episodes aired mostly in order, with some minor exceptions for specials and a couple small mix-ups that were mostly inconsequential to canon. They also aired fairly consistently, and also in the US before other territories. However, Nickelodeon completely fumbled with season 3. Season 2's airing concluded with Reality Trip in June 2006, and unlike the previous 2 summers, the rest of the summer was completely devoid of Danny. Then, as fall approached, we got promos for the 6th episode of the season, which was advertised like a TV movie event. Urban Jungle had a game tie-in for some reason on DS and Game Boy Advance? But where was the rest of the season? Where did the episodes go? Well, they only aired the 6th episode that October, and nothing else. Mind you, episode 1 changed up the status quo as much or more than Public Enemies did, and only the most dedicated fans would have known this was wrong, as some of the episodes began airing in Mexico and later Canada, if I recall correctly. I remember seeing a few prominent fan artists from those regions start drawing spoilers, and eventually there were some pretty sketchy means of watching the episodes early. Then in June the following summer, we got a whole week of premieres! Starting with episode 2! We had 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 premiere all at once in 1 week. Wow! Episode 2, guys! Where's episode 1? We finally saw An Eye for an Eye in the 2nd and final week of premieres in late August, around the time kids started going back to school, mind you. They aired 1, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the finale, all in that week. It was so dumb and so stupid, and everyone always talks about, oh, Korra got screwed over, oh, Teenage Robot didn't get to finish its series, but Danny Phantom is right there being an absolute mess, and nobody ever freaking talks about it. I rant about this all the time. You don't understand. It just absolutely drives me crazy, and I feel like I'm the only one that ever remembers, but nobody ever talks about it. No other YouTubers ever talked about it. I'm barely a YouTuber, and I'm talking about it right now. Anyway, season 3 also saw the departure of writers Marty Eisenberg and Steve Marmol, who played a critical role in some of the best character development in the series, and most of the writing was taken over by Fairly OddParents regular Kevin Sullivan and Hartman himself, who usually had directing and boarding credits up to this point, not writing credits. Art director Bob Boyle also departed at this point, and the staff changes were very noticeable in the quality of season 3. That said, Eye for an Eye. Vlad becomes the mayor. Danny and Vlad harass each other. Feels like a slightly higher stakes maternal bonding. Just super lame after what season 2 gave us. C. Infinite Realms. Everyone loved drawing Ron and Danny. I think the concept of this episode is fine, but the execution is kind of middling. We get the introduction to Frostbite and Danny's project to map the Ghost Zone, which is kind of cool in theory, but I don't think it's focused on enough throughout the rest of the series. Girls Night Out. This is just the Valentine's Day special of Fairly OddParents, but worse. D. Torrent of Terror. Vlad being mayor has consequences in this episode, and basically goes as expected at this point, I guess. D. Forever Phantom. Cool concept of a villain, but is not really executed in any interesting way. C. Urban Jungle. Why did this get a game tie-in again? Danny gets ice powers, I guess, but like, why? Why? C. Live in large. I hate this episode. F. Boxed up fury. I am once again complaining about a cool concept with mid-execution. Glad my boy the box ghost got to be taken seriously, though. C. Frightmare. This is just Danny Sam shipping the episode. D. Claw of the Wild. Okay, why is every camping episode the same in every cartoon? Swear to God they did the same thing in Kim Possible and All Grown Up, too. D. Destabilized. This is the best episode of the whole entire series, and it was written by Amy Keating Rogers, who I sat next to at Comic-Con 2013, and I told her that she wrote the best episode of Danny Phantom Season 3 while I was at the My Little Pony panel. I love the Dannys, I love Valerie, I love Vlad, all in this episode. It's so fantastic, you guys. S. Phantom Planet. What the hell kind of ending was this? D. Suffice it to say, Season 1 was solid, and Season 2 introduced a lot higher stakes, while Season 3 fumbled almost as much in actual content as Nickelodeon fumbled its airtime. It ended rather unceremoniously, only for reruns to air afterwards at like 6 a.m. on weekdays, and then eventually pushed to the Nicktoons network. Throughout Danny's runtime, he made several appearances in other media, including Nickelodeon Magazine Comics, and a featured special edition Nickelodeon magazine, Steve Marmol on Johnny Talk, which actually happened a year before the series premiered, the Weird Butch Hartman crossover, last year's graphic novel that I still haven't read, oops, and of course, video games. Back in the day, the Nick Arcade had an expansive amount of Flash games, including a few Danny Phantom-themed ones. But the one I remember most was this 3D one where Danny was sucking up octopuses' ectopi with a vacuum. I'm genuinely blanking on any of the other games. I think there was an Ultimate Enemy one. I don't really remember. Honestly, the only other Nick Arcade game I really remember is the Fairly Odd Parents School's Out, like, Friday Night Funkin'-esque game. So, unfortunately, a lot of that is lost to time because of the loss of Flash in most of our browsers. On consoles, Danny had two solo games, The Ultimate Enemy on Game Boy Advance, and Urban Jungle, which released both on Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS. Both are short and pretty bad, honestly, which, unfortunately, was par for the course for Nickelodeon THQ handheld games at the time, sadly. Danny also appeared as a main character in the Nicktoons Unite series, alongside Jimmy Neutron, Timmy Turner, and SpongeBob. While I own all of them on GameCube, Game Boy Advance, or Wii, I've never actually taken the time to play through them, but I've heard the first one's pretty good. The rest of Danny's game appearances mostly include being a playable character of some sort in a plethora of Nicktoons games. Freeze Frame Frenzy, I love that game, Nicktoons Movin' for the PS2 iToy, Nicktoons Baseball, Nickelodeon Scene It, Nicktoons Racin', and of course, All-Star Brawl and Brawl 2, the latter of which involves Vlad in the story mode, according to Toasty. I refuse to buy it because they didn't have a physical cartridge for Switch. But that's besides the point. Danny also appeared on home video, first through the Nick Picks DVDs, featuring just one episode per volume. There were also episodes released on Game Boy Advance Video, and I think like 1 or 2 Video Now releases? Anyone remember Video Now? Eventually, the entire series was released digitally on iTunes and Amazon, as well as in a physical DVD set. It's been streamed on a couple of different services, including Hulu and Paramount+. As far as other merchandising goes, there wasn't much of that either at the time. On Nick.com circa 2005 to 6, all there was a children's graphic tee, a children's sweatshirt with Danny sucking up Skulker, the logo Ringer tee, which is super cool, I still have mine. He appeared as a small part of the 15 Years of Nicktoons poster, and otherwise mostly appeared here and there, most of the merchandise he was on was alongside other Nicktoons, like on Crayola tubs, etc. But for some reason, food tie-ins were huge with Danny Phantom. The Ultimate Enemy had a Burger King toy promotion with a full line of toys that actually crossed over with the Game Boy Advance game more than they crossed over with the show, which was kind of weird. A Captain Crunch promotion with spooky ghost-shaped crunch berries, and a Kid Cuisine promotion with ghost-shaped nuggies. And fun fact, David Kaufman, voice of Danny, also voiced the Kid Cuisine penguin. Campbell's made SpaghettiOs and chicken noodle soup with Danny-inspired shapes. There was an elusive Danny Phantom character popsicle that I've decided never actually existed, because I could never find it at my local ice cream truck. I tried so hard. But for a show that was pushing action for boys, there really wasn't much marketed towards them. No action figures, no play sets, no nothing. We could have gotten a Fenton thermos. It was right there. We could have gotten Nerf toys. It would have been so cool, but we didn't. And that stunk. Later, during the 2010s, there was a brief resurgence of nostalgia marketing, which brought 2 Hot Topic tee designs and a plethora of Funko Pops. As far as I'm aware, without doing any further research, that was pretty much it until they released the graphic novel last year. The Danny Phantom fandom was my first experience in any kind of online fandom. It was most active in a few spots around the internet. The Nickelodeon message boards, the official Butch Hartman forum, the Danny Phantom online forums, Danny Phantom Online, and DeviantArt. Danny Phantom's fandom was most active in a few spots around the internet. The Nickelodeon message boards, the official Butch Hartman forum, the Danny Phantom Online forum, Danny Phantom Online, and DeviantArt. The Nickelodeon message boards were designed for and limited to kids under 18, with limited HTML posts and moderators who had to approve every single post that went through. Though it was only updated daily, I found myself spending oodles of time on there, and made friends who are still mutuals to this day. Fanfiction and discussion were the only things that were really able to happen there, and you couldn't post any outside links. Moderator Nick E. Chris was a real one for putting up with all of us. The official Butch Hartman forums were available at butchhartman.com, and aside from the little Tim Pod Flash MP3 player with full versions of songs from Danny Phantom and Fairly OddParents, the forums were the main feature of the website. While there was a Fairly OddParents portion of the forums, the primary focus was on Danny Phantom, from posting episode discussions and theories to posting fan art, all sorts of different things. It was also heavily moderated to have a family-friendly PG vibe as well. The Danny Phantom online forums were run pretty much by the folks who moderated the OBHF. Most of the membership crossed over with the OBHF, but there were different discussions to be had there. The best part of the DPOF was the picture archive, where members and moderators would post screen captures and GIFs from the show. The moderators also put on many community events, including making big fan posters and even a quilt to give to Butch Hartman for the Dannyversaries. Danny Phantom Online was another forum that was an offshoot of a GeoCities or a Tripod website, something like that. And I remember being a part of it, but aside from that, I don't really remember much. I think the color scheme of the forum was similar to the DPOF, but that's about as far as I can remember. DeviantArt was home to a ton of Danny Phantom fan art, fan fictions, fan groups, role-playing, fandom cliques, you name it. I remember learning how to do digital art from other Danny Phantom fan artists who made tutorials. I was inspired by some of the leading fan artists in the community at the time. I met a lot of great people, and I remember my time there mostly fondly, despite a lot of the cringe. For a show that was so mistreated by the network, Danny Phantom had a very big online following, probably second only to Avatar: The Last Airbender as far as the Nicktoons go. The fandom even came together and protested Nickelodeon following the show's production being canceled in January 2006, the Save Danny movement. Not everything was sunshine and rainbows, though. Sometime in late 2006, a true fans versus anti-fans war broke out. True fans were the ones who supported Butch Hartman and the show's canon, and felt that anything that deviated from the canon was disgusting and didn't belong. The true fan movement was more or less spearheaded by the OBHF and DPOF moderators, and essentially stuck to the language of a post Hartman had made about some fan creations disappointing him, which included significant anti-canon work and slash. And the true fans lumped those kinds of creators in with the already ousted not safe for work artists. Forum bans became more frequent, with the moderators often sifting through users' works off-site. As a pushback to this, the Real Fans DeviantArt group was created, which was a group to celebrate Danny Phantom fans regardless of their headcanons or ships. It spread the message of, do not flame each other, and many folks in the fandom gravitated towards it. But following an announcement from Hartman in early 2008, anyone who joined this group was also banned from the OBHF and the DPOF. I don't have a record of what occurred necessarily, but I do have a record of my resignation from the Real Fans group, which alluded to the announcement, as well as resignations from a couple of the moderators and staff from the forums. Eventually, with fandom inner turmoil and the series having already come to a close, the Danny Phantom fandom mostly fizzled out. Until Butch Hartman became a YouTuber. I didn't really involve myself or pay attention to his content at this point, but I do remember seeing murmurings of folks wanting the series to come back in some way. The hashtag #GoGhostAgain movement made its way to my Twitter account, as well as some of the YouTube channels that I watched at the time. But personally, because of the disappointment that was Season 3, as well as how the fandom ended up, I simply wasn't interested enough to keep track of what was going on, mostly rolling my eyes and sighing anytime I saw the hashtag. The graphic novel seemed to have a warm reception at least. Last year's graphic novel seemed to have a warm reception at least, so I'm happy there's content available for folks who were excited about it. Regardless of how the show ended, and regardless of the big fandom drama, I have nothing but fondness for my involvement in the Danny Phantom fandom and my unhinged obsession over the show. Some of my nerdiness over it has leaked into my current group of online friends. Sorry again, Darcy, for quoting almost every line of Fright Night during our movie night. But I'm really glad to have finally made a video just talking about my thoughts on the show and the fandom as a whole, in some somewhat cohesive manner at least. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, not seeing is believing.